All right, good afternoon. So we're going to talk about story leading, creative leadership to inspire and align in a crisis, which is what we find ourselves right in the middle of now. Now, the thing is, this is not my first rodeo. I was just counting back in my career. This is actually the fourth crisis that I've experienced. And I wanted to kick off with an example, actually talking back to 1997, 98, when we had the Asia financial crisis. Who's the DJ here? Right. So in that crisis, actually, I was the managing director of a multinational ad agency in Singapore. What I'm pleased to tell you is that we came out of that crisis 44% up in terms of revenue and 21% up in terms of profit levels. So I was quite pleased with that achievement. And what I'm going to outline to you over the next 30 or 40 minutes is some of the things that I did, some of the tools, the techniques, and especially the communication hacks, let's call it that helped me to keep the team together, to align the team and get them to put in that performance, which brought us to that level. So what I'd like to do is kick off with an example from JFK. Now, this is one of the most powerful mission statements, literally a mission statements ever. And he said, "I believe this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth." Now, that's a part of a speech that he made in 1961, a really galvanizing speech, something that brought the whole nation of the USA together at that time. And don't they need something galvanizing and uniting right at this moment as well? Now, I'm going to put a little teaser in there for you. You've got to wait till the end of my session today to find out how this maps to the tools that we're talking about and why this worked so effectively as a mission statement. Okay, moving on. This is how stories work. Now, you might think, stories are just kind of something very soft, something a little bit fluffy. Hey, Lloyd, we're in a crisis, man. Give us some hard tools. Well, stories are a really great tool because stories inform behavior. They let your team know what's expected of them. And in these very turbulent times, people are confused. They don't know what's expected of them because things are different, times are different, they're working from home. So what's the behavior? What's the new norm? And you as a leader need to lead by example. You need to model those behaviors. Those behaviors then actually shape what's known as your culture, your corporate culture, your work culture. That in turn affects performance, good performance, better performance, and good performance results in even more stories that you can tell, that you can share, that incite increased behavior. So you've got a wonderful virtuous circle going on. Thank you. So 3 things we're going to touch on this afternoon. It's a bit of a, as I say, 30 to 40 minute sprint through what is a story. And I assume that most of you as leaders will have a good knowledge of that. So we're not going to get bogged down there. We're going to talk about your management style as a creative leader through crisis and leading with stories. So a bag of tips, tools, and techniques for you. So what is a story? Often we think of a story as something with something like a beginning, a middle, of an end, a verbal narrative. But really the important ingredient of a story is a transformation. There must be a beginning state and there must be an end state, and they are different. And what's happened in the middle is a transformation. How have you changed, or how has your company changed, all hopefully for the better? But here's the main point in leadership. What you say must equal what you do. If you can just think you can sit in your desk all day or sit behind your Zoom camera all day telling stories, and the world's going to be a better place and the company's going to turn around because of that, you're wrong. What you say must equal what you do, otherwise you have no story. A few of the speakers today have touched on this. Shushma, Bruce, Sam, it's all coming together. What you do is just as important a part of your story as what you say. It's how you model those behaviors. It's how you live and breathe the story. Because if your story is just something which is a YouTube clip or a bunch of fancy words on the canteen wall, that's not a story. That's just a poster. It's just a fridge magnet. You've got to live and breathe your story for it to do any good for you. Now, let's think of evocative stories. We've already talked about JFK. Another one comes to mind, which was Martin Luther King. When Martin Luther King got 1 million people to his Human Rights March, he didn't get in front of them, stand up and say, "I have a plan." Nobody's inspired by plans. You can plan all you like. It doesn't fire up people's imagination. What he said was what? "I have a dream." And it wasn't just his dream, it was everybody's dream. It was all those millions of people's dreams. So he galvanized, there's that word again. Galvanize means bringing people together, uniting them, because you're firing their imagination. And we need to use evocative language to fire people's imaginations, to bring them along with us on this beautiful journey, our mission, that we want them to come along with us. And this is so important in a crisis moment, because people are now fragmented, they're working from home, they're all over the place, and the divisiveness has never been more. Think of it this way. What's the difference between two words? House and home. One is house, one is home. Why don't you just jump into your chat bar and just put down a word. When you think of the word house, what does that mean to you? And when you think of the word home, what does that mean to you? Very quickly, jump into chat and let's get a feel for that. And we'll revisit that a little bit later. So what's the difference between house and home? Are they the same thing or are they different? Some answers coming in. Thanks, Govert, Andrew. Few people quick off the draw. Scott's in there. Great, there's people buzzing away. This is fantastic. Yvonne, thank you. Good. All righty. So, evocative, good story leading. Wow, they didn't come much better than Steve Jobs, and I highly recommend that you watch his Stanford commencement speech, 1995, I think it was, that he made that speech. Absolutely nailed it. But this is something that he set out about Apple. He said, we're not about making boxes to help people get their work done. We believe people with passion can change the world for the better. So can you see, it's very evocative, very emotional language. He's getting away from the objective boxes. That's what it is at the end of the day. And I'm coming at you live from a MacBook Air this afternoon. It's not about the boxes. It's what that box, that Apple box, says about me. I believe that I'm a person with passion. This box represents who I am and what I'm trying to achieve, which is to help change the world for the better. And hopefully in the course of this afternoon session, we are changing your world for the better today by giving you some value here. It's all about emotion. Evocative language is all about emotion. Now, Bruce talked a little bit before about, reacting and responding and overreacting and too much emotion in certain cases. Yes, but we have got 154 emotions at our disposal, according to Oxford University, And the question is this: how many emotions are you actually deploying in your corporate communication or in your messaging to your team? Often in a corporate situation, we really compress things down, and it's been a bit of a recurring theme today, where we're losing humanity, and we really need to reclaim that. That's what humans are all about. We need to reclaim humanity, and emotions are the secret sauce, and we're going to talk about that more. So, Stanford, we talked about it with Steve Jobs. I was lucky enough to be there early of last year, where Chip Heath is doing amazing work in this whole thing of sticky stories. And his research at Stanford showed that when you tell people a story, they will recall 63% of the details. That's 2/3 of all details, which are wrapped in a story, will be remembered a week later, a month later, a good story, a year or 10 years later. Just think of yourself when you tell a great story of your own life or of your family life. Gosh, some of those stories might be 20 years old, right? Whereas if you give people bullet points and facts, just 5% of actual statistics are retained because they're not sticky and they don't end up in the decision-making part of the brain. Stories end up in the decision-making part of the brain. And because of that, stories lead to action. And that's what you want as a leader, from yourself and from your team. So it brings us to something of a mantra for the session this afternoon. I mean, I come from a psychology background, and the neuroscience of storytelling is this: 70% of all purchases are made on an emotional basis, not on a rational basis. 70%. Which means that people don't buy facts, they buy feelings. And just to help you remember that, people don't buy facts, they buy feelings, I'm going to give you a little earworm to deal with. Music, please, Mr. DJ. No, we skipped the music. Not to worry. All right. Take it out a bit here. All right, perfect. Thank you. People don't buy facts, they buy feelings. Okay, so your management style. I'm just going to talk about how you as a leader can build connection, because that's what's really needed in these very divisive, very distributed times. So what we're going to talk about here is a connection story, which is typically what I call a why I do what I do story. If you come from a place of passion, you're going to really get people on board with your mission. If they believe that you're fully invested, fully bought into this mission, they will buy your enthusiasm. They will happily come along on that ride with you. So one of my favorite examples in this category is from P&G, and A.G. Lafley was the CEO there for many years, highly, highly successful. Now in 2005, P&G bought out Gillette. It was a $57 billion deal. Everybody was excited, except all the rank and file people at Gillette. Now, what do you think was going through their mind? What was going through their mind was, do I still have a job? Once we merge with P&G, they've got all these people, they've got these amazing teams that are, why do they need me? So it was fear what was running through Gillette. And of course, all the leaders, especially at Gillette, were banging their chests. Isn't this fantastic? It's a great day for Gillette. It's the best thing ever for the company. And everyone's saying, do I still have a job? And so a big town hall was called, and the Gillette execs got up there and banged their chests. Nobody was reassured. A.G. Lafley got up on stage and he said, before we start, I'd like to tell you a little about me. And he spent 5 minutes saying, hey, you know what? I was born on the wrong side of the tracks. I didn't go to the best school. I didn't have the best family background, etc., etc. but by God, I worked hard. I got up there on good Midwestern values. I ended up serving the forces in Vietnam. I then joined P&G. I got posted to Asia, moved around, and finally I became CEO, et cetera, et cetera. He spent 5 minutes just talking about himself and who he was, what his family values were. So everybody in the room felt they knew A.G. Lafley. Then, and only then, once I had the reassurance, did he go on to talk about the deal, the future, the partnership, everything that the P&G Gillette deal represented. And people left that town hall reassured. In fact, one guy from Gillette remarked to a buddy of his from P&G and said, wow, isn't that funny? I know more about that guy after 5 minutes than I do about my own boss after 5 years. So that's why we need to build in the time to build these little connections, create these strong bonds. So a little bit about me, and you can use that in one-on-ones, on new team meetings, anytime you've got some new kind of client partnership arrangement. This is a really good tool to go to. So the next one is Amazon. Now, Jeff Bezos, and this is going back, gosh, I think to the late 90s, when if you went and interviewed at Amazon, believe it or not, you were interviewed by Jeff Bezos because the company was that small. And he said, it's not easy to work here. When I interview people, I tell them, you can work long, hard, or smart, but at Amazon, you can't choose 2 out of 3. But we are working to build something important, something that matters to our customers, something that we can all tell our grandchildren about. Wow. You know, he was just a small little startup in a garage, and he was already thinking generationally. You guys are part of this thing that's going to become so important. You're going to be part of some kind of history here. And as we know it, he completely disrupted e-commerce for the world as we know it, and in the process became one of the world's wealthiest individuals, as did his ex-wife. Great story, but everybody came along on the ride if they bought into that story of, we're here to build something important. What a great mission statement. Now, the other one, which I like to talk about, is SpaceX. So we all know Elon Musk, right? Disrupted PayPal, right? Tesla, SpaceX, and now he's got all sorts of other interesting companies in the way. Now, he was absolutely convinced that we could build a reusable rocket. The idea was we could reuse the rocket instead of just building a new rocket for every single stellar launch. The first launch took place. The rocket went up, that was fine. Then it came down and it completely missed the launch pad and went sploosh, straight into the bottom of the ocean. Strike one. Oh well, back to the drawing board. Fine tuning. Launch number 2, the second rocket, went up into space beautifully, came back, and the idea was there was a pontoon in the middle of the ocean where it could re-land safely. It thudded into that pontoon and toppled off the edge and sank to the bottom of the ocean. Strike 2. Now, everybody who was working for SpaceX at that time thought, oh my God, I don't think we can have another failure. I better start looking for another job now. If we have a failure third time, for sure, he's just going to walk away from this and it's the end of SpaceX. It's not worth pursuing. Mission 3, what happened? They launched the rocket, beautiful. Halfway up its trajectory, bang, the thing completely exploded, shattered into millions of pieces, and that was the end of the third rocket. So of course now everyone thought, that's it, that's the end of SpaceX. But Elon got all his team together and said, guys, we will build the perfect rocket no matter what. If it takes every last dollar I have, if I have to move in and sleep in my parents' basement, I will make that reusable rocket happen. And what happened? He galvanized the team. Everyone thought, wow, he's leading by example. If that's what Elon's going to do, really, he's prepared to risk every dollar, even move into his parents' home just to, make this thing work. Wow, okay, Elon, we're in. And everybody got straight back to work, back to the drawing boards, replanning, fine-tuning. And shortly afterwards, they secured a NASA contract for billions of dollars and became the first private contractor to send rockets to the International Space Station. A success story, a winner, based on him bringing the team together at that moment of absolute low crisis. Shake it out. Okay, people don't buy facts, they buy feelings. And I've got a special guest commentator here, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator, just to help you remember this mantra. And the mantra is, say it with me, people don't buy facts, they buy feelings. Okay, so don't forget it. Now we're going to come to a couple of what I call internal mission and alignment stories. Some good examples of how you can put something out really simply and very quickly, just to help your team to come up with something that they can buy into, that they can get behind. Now, one of the best examples in this whole thing is from Bill Gates. Well, he looks a bit different back then, doesn't he? And computers look a lot different back then, don't they? And so his mission statement there was a computer on every desk and in every home. Now, bear in mind, personal computing, PC, was not a thing back then. IBM didn't even investigate it as an opportunity. Their research had showed there was something like a demand for 100 PCs around the world. But this was Microsoft's mission, a computer on every desk and in every home. So everybody who came to work at Microsoft knew exactly what they were there to do. That was their mission. All very clear, all summed up in one beautiful, succinct sentence, and we know that he's achieved that. P&G, they have a 3-word story. So get back to A.G. Lafley once again. He walked into a crowded meeting room one afternoon, and all these executives were arguing, oh, I think this, and we should do that, and I think, and no, you don't, and blah, 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 blah. He said, oi, 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 enough. What does the customer think? And this was revolutionary to them. Nobody had thought to ask the customer. And he walked out of that room, leaving them with a 3-word story. Customer is boss. And if your story is customer is boss, every decision you make is guided by that principle. What does the customer think? Not what do I think? I might have a fantastic degree from a major Ivy League university. It's not what I think, it's what the customer thinks. Have we consulted them? So that's a 3-word story. You see how simple storytelling and story leading can be. It can be simple. It's not complicated. It's not rocket science. Talk about SpaceX. You can do it, and you're about to do it. So let's have a look at the next exercise. Now, this is your homework. We haven't got time to workshop it in this session, but please feel free to pump me on questions on how to make this work. Now, to make a good story or slogan or catch cry, what I suggest you do is take this to your team. Now, you can make a company-wide one, depending on the size of your organization. It can be company-wide, it can be business unit by business unit, it can be department by department. Come up with a statement, come up with that story using either rhyme or something that's repetitive or something which we call opposing. Let me give you some examples. So something that rhymes. Dump trump. That rhymes, that makes it powerful. See, coming from the neuroscience side of things as I do, the power of these things in sticking, we talk about stickiness in the brain. Rhyme is really strong. No pain, no gain. We're familiar with that one, right? Why do we remember it? Because it's got that beautiful rhyme in it. What about repetition? Well, you might try something like this. Do it once, do it well. That's my mantra. Everybody that's ever worked with me probably knows that one because I shout it all the time. Do it once, do it well. Take the time to get it right. No guts, no glory. Or reduce, reuse, recycle. You see the repetition there? Reduce, reuse, recycle. Or opposing. So at the moment, Thai immigration have this thing, good guys in, bad guys out. So it creates a tension in the brain by using opposing. It's an interesting framing thing. And there's one more example of opposing here on the next frame. So guns down, test scores up. So you've got the opposing, guns down, test scores up. So if we just go back to the previous frame, and you'll all get a copy of this presentation, by the way, please make this a team exercise. This is a great way to get your team together in these distributed times and set them this goal. So, okay, guys, what do we stand for? What are we really doing here? And get them to come up with the catch cry. What's their team's war cry here? And why do we get them involved? A, because it's fun. B, because it's creative. And C, if they come up with it, they buy into it. And we've had a lot of success working with companies, major companies on this exercise. It really gets people to understand what it is that they're doing, why they're doing it, and to articulate what they're doing. Good, thank you. Okay, shake it out. And just have a reminder once again, people don't buy facts, they buy feelings. This time sponsored by Jackie Chan. So any karate or martial arts experts listening in today, play along here. How would Jackie Chan say this? So we remember it, so it sticks in our brain. He'd go, wow, people don't buy facts, they buy feelings. Wow. Something like that. But you're gonna remember it, right? Especially over the music. Okay, next one, please. So, just gonna finish off now with a couple of things of do's and don'ts leading with story, some best practice kind of frameworks and tools. Now, the first question is, you know, I'm a storyteller. I've been a storyteller professionally for 30 years. The question is it always a good time for a story? And the answer is no. The answer is no. There are times when you don't tell stories. For example, let's look at the first technique, which is called bluff. Now, many years ago, I had to fire a guy called Vincent. And I sat down, hey, Vincent, how are you doing? How's your family? How's your dog? Did you see this movie yet? Blah, blah, blah. And poor old Vincent's sitting there sweating, going, what the hell is he talking about? Why is he called this meeting? Blah, 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 blah. Eventually, I got around to the point, and the point was, boom, Vincent, you're fired. Damn, I thought we were having a really nice chat for the first time ever. That was really bad management on my behalf. Now, I'm glad to say that was more than 20 years ago. I wish I knew this back then. Military people would be familiar with this technique, bluff, bottom line up front. There are situations, and especially people that are in situations now having to let people on their team go, bottom line up front means you sit Vincent down and say, Vincent, bad news, we've got to let you go. You then could probably wheel out a story. Hey, Vincent, I know this is a terrible blow for you, but you know what? There was another guy or girl that we let go before, and you know what? She went off and started her own printing company, and now look, because you know she's very successful with that printing business, and she's now driving a Mercedes Benz. So Vincent, that's a success story. Wow, that came out of that. So this is not the end of the world. It might feel like it is now, Vincent, but it's not. So that's the type of thing. Get the bottom line up front, but then you can build in a story after that, especially if it's got a feel-good factor. And the next one is burger. Now, in general situations, now this might be a work performance thing, we use what we call the burger format. maybe some of you are familiar with this. It's a three-part thing, and many of the most successful story situations are three-part. So a burger means basically you've got a top, a middle, and a bottom. Start positive. You can have the negative in the middle, and that might be turbulence and transformation, but always, always, always finish on a positive note, right? Now that follows what we call a classic Aristotelian story curve. Start positive, life's like this. Here comes the change factor. Here comes the turbulence and the transformation, like what we're going through now. But boom, here comes the happy ending, all right? Plus, negative, plus, burger. And then finally, we're going to talk about in these situations, if you've got to deliver what we call high fear messages, as a leader, as a CEO, as MD, as a marketing director, somebody is leading a team. In these times, you're going to have to deliver high fear messages. Everyone's on the run, everyone's nervous, everyone's uncertain. If you just go on fear, people will run to ground. They'll bury their heads in the sand. So fear alone can create denial and inertia. So look at Kodak, look at Blockbuster. Every big company which says, we're too big to fail, that's denial and inertia. But if you're having to deliver bad news, high fear messages, hey guys, we've only got a month of cash flow left. Don't just scare the proverbial out of them. Give them some clear, specific, effective action steps in terms of, hey, how we can, prolong our cash flow or step up our revenues, something like that. Or clear steps as to what I need from you next is ... All right. All right. So I promised we'd circle back to the example of JFK. I believe this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before the decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth. As I said, that's one of the great galvanizing mission statements of all time. And let me now map it to a tool and unpack it and show you why it's powerful and how you can hopefully create equally powerful and compelling mission statements. So the next tool is what we call UPS. You're probably familiar with the courier service UPS, right? This has got nothing to do with it, but it's just a great mnemonic to remember it. Urgency, passion, stakes. Let's start with passion. Because why? It's always great to start with passion, and all good things do start with passion. So in this one, thank you. In this one, passion. He said, I believe. He was talking from a very personal point of view. He was talking of his worldview. He was really putting himself on the line there. That was where passion comes from. So if you start with I believe, people are saying, okay, he's really talking from the heart here. He's talking from he or she, talking from a very personal point of view. And when you are acting and speaking with authenticity, you gain authority and credibility. The next thing is stakes. What stakes? It means what we can win from this, gain from this, or conversely, lose from this by not doing it. And it's really important to point out both. All right. So what's at stake? Back to the JFK example. What was at stake there? Well, let's look at the historical context. Firstly, it was the space race. It was the Cold War, US versus Russia. That was the high stakes. That was very high stakes. America didn't want to be left behind. They had some catching up to do, but there's also personal stakes, and I think this was the magic of his message. He said, we're going to send a man to the moon and hopefully bring him back, which seeds the doubt in your mind. You go, wow, this could go horribly wrong. This astronaut may never make it back to his wife and children. Wow, that's scary. I wonder if they can do it. And so the whole nation bought into this thing, of this mission. It wasn't just for the propeller heads at NASA. This was everybody's mission, and not just Americans. I was raised in Africa. I was living in Africa back in those days. I remember that. Wow, that was one of the most exciting world events ever. And finally, urgency. Always put a timeline on things. Whenever you have a call to action or something that needs doing, say when. Is it by Tuesday? Is it by next week? Is it this quarter? Is it within this financial year? In JFK's example, he said, within the decade. Now, this is far-fetched. This was sci-fi. He made that speech in November of 1961. And on July the 20th, 1969, so less than 8 years later, Apollo 11 landed on the moon and made the mission a success. Sadly, JFK wasn't around by then to witness that, but he set that in motion. And whilst we all remember who the first man on the moon was, I think the real hero of that story, of that mission, was in fact JFK. So that's what I've got for you this afternoon. One more rousing rendition of People Don't Buy Facts, They Buy Feelings, just so you never, ever, ever forget it. This time, our guest speaker is Mr. Morgan Freeman, the voice of God. And how would he say it? Well, he'd say something like, people don't buy facts, they buy feelings. Ladies and gents, thank you so much for investing your time with me this afternoon. It's been really a pleasure. So wherever you are in the world, thank you for tuning in. I hope it's been valuable to you, and I hope I've given you some actionable tools. Open up for questions. Russ, over to you, sir.